Episode 317 gave you a perspective you may not have considered. Volume as a training principle is not confined to the gym. It appears wherever there's a gap between starting and staying. The project, the skill, the friendship, the habit. The commitment that persists after the feeling that launched it has passed. That perspective is valuable, but it can be uncomfortable. You start seeing volume where you've been using it well, but you also see how you've mishandled it. The projects you started and abandoned. The skills you practiced until the plateau and then left behind. The commitments you made to yourself and then quietly, perhaps sheepishly, broke because no one was watching. Today, we conclude our exploration of volume by learning how to apply the signal in daily life. We see it's not for everything. There are times when abandoning pursuits is not a mistake or a moral failure. It's the right choice. We must choose only a few things to accumulate. The skill is in defining the commitment before the feeling fades and learning the discipline that volume in daily life actually requires. Hey there, it's me, Core, and you're listening to Exercise and Consistency, from fitness to flourishing. Before we look at what works, we need to know what doesn't work. It doesn't work to stay in everything. The person who cannot let go of anything, the project that stalled, the relationship that ran its course, the skill they no longer care about, is not practicing volume. They are hoarding commitments. And hoarding is the enemy of accumulation. You cannot accumulate meaningful volume in a dozen directions. You can only spread yourself thin and call it loyalty. Refusing to quit doesn't work. There's a difference between volume and stubbornness. Volume is staying in the work because the work still matters. Stubbornness is staying in the work because leaving feels like failure. One is discernment. The other is a matter of ego and foolish pride. The person who practices volume intelligently knows when to leave. The feeling will fade, but that's not the moment. It's when the pursuit no longer aligns with the person they're becoming. Mistaking duration for progress doesn't work. Volume counts only if the work is meaningful. 10 years in the same job, doing the same thing, learning nothing, accumulating nothing, is not volume. That's inertia, a rut. Volume requires that the staying produces something. Not necessarily visible progress every day, but a direction, a trajectory. A sense that the accumulation is building towards something rather than merely repeating. Don't ask yourself, how many things am I staying in? The quantity is irrelevant. The question is, what are you accumulating? And is it consistent with your highest values and most important goals? In episode 316, we learned the lessons of the body. That excessive volume in the gym produces cumulative fatigue, disguised stagnation, and psychological volume dependence. We see the same pattern in daily life with different terms. Scattered accumulation replaces cumulative fatigue. You will not feel physically tired because you are staying in too many commitments, but you will feel a specific kind of mental exhaustion. The exhaustion of divided attention. Every commitment you maintain requires a portion of your awareness. The project you are working on, the skill you are practicing, the relationship you are nurturing, the habit you are building. Each one inhabits a slice of your mental bandwidth. When there are too many slices, no single commitment gets enough of you to accumulate meaningful volume. You are staying in everything. You are accumulating nothing. Invisible stagnation replaces disguised stagnation. In the gym, excessive volume can look like progress because the numbers are going up. More reps, sets, sessions. In daily life, scattered volume can look like a full life. You are busy. You have projects. You have commitments. But none of them are deepening. The skill has not improved in 6 months. The project is the same shape it was in a year ago. The relationship has not moved past the surface. You are running in place across multiple lanes, and the busyness disguises the fact that nothing is accumulating. Commitment fatigue replaces psychological volume dependence. The mind adapts to the daily routine and neurochemical rewards your choices trigger. If you give your life the demand of too many commitments, it adapts by making each commitment shallower. You learn to stay at the surface of things. You learn to give just enough to keep the commitment alive without ever giving enough to let it become something. Over time, this becomes the default. You forget what it feels like to stay deeply in one thing because you've trained yourself to stay shallowly in many. The common thread: volume applied without focus does not accumulate, it dissipates. The signal is lost in the noise. The solution is not to abandon everything. It's to apply volume the same way you learned to apply it in the gym, in specific pursuits at a chosen depth for a defined duration. Here's what that looks like in practice. Choose a few things. You cannot accumulate meaningful volume in everything. You must choose. Not 50 things, not 10, a few. The number is less important than the honesty. How many pursuits can you genuinely stay in without spreading yourself past the point where any single one deepens? For most people, the answer is smaller than they want it to be. 2 or 3 pursuits beyond the non-negotiable demands of life. The project that matters, the skill you are building, the relationship you are nurturing. Choose them, name them, write them down. Everything else is allowed to exist at baseline. Baseline is not failure. It's the only thing that makes focused depth possible. Define the commitment before the feeling fades. Volume in daily life has a unique vulnerability. It depends on a feeling that is not designed to last. The intensity of starting, the enthusiasm, the novelty, the sense that this time is different will fade. It's supposed to fade. Intensity is for beginning. Volume is for continuing. The problem is that most people make their commitments during the intensity phase, using language the intensity phase provides. I will write every day. I will train 5 times a week. I will call every week. When the intensity fades, these commitments feel like weights. They were written by a version of you that had momentum. The version of you that has to honor them does not. The fix is to define the commitment in terms the post-intensity version of you can sustain. Not, I will write every day. Instead, I will write twice a week, minimum 300 words for 3 months. Not, I will train 5 times a week. Instead, I will train 3 times a week, every week, without negotiation, for a month. The commitment must be specific enough to measure and modest enough to survive the death of enthusiasm. Another key is to limit how long you are willing to stay committed. Forever is overwhelming and unrealistic. You need to be able to evaluate after a reasonable length of time. 12 weeks is a good experiment. It's short enough to be endurable, yet long enough to provide good feedback and experience. It's important to build a maintenance floor. This is the volume equivalent of adding 1. But instead of adding, you are establishing the minimum, the smallest unit of sustained effort that still counts as staying. A maintenance floor is the version of the commitment you can honor on the worst week of the year. Not the average week, the worst week. The week where everything goes wrong, where energy is low, where the feeling that launched the pursuit is a distant memory. On that week, what is the smallest thing you know you can do? For the project, it might be 10 minutes of work. For the skill, it might be 5 minutes of practice. For the relationship, it might be a single message that says, "I'm thinking of you," with nothing else attached. These actions are almost nothing, but they are not nothing. They are the signal that the commitment is still alive. And the accumulation of those signals across weeks and months and years is volume. Let the rest go without guilt. This is the discipline most people never develop. The ability to release a commitment without interpreting the release as failure. Not everything you start deserves to be seen through. Some pursuits were experiments, and the experiment ran its course. Some commitments were made with information that has now changed. Some relationships were right for a season and wrong for the next. Letting go is not breaking a promise. It's updating a decision with better data. The person who practices volume intelligently is not the person who finishes everything. They're the person who finishes the things that matter and refuses to let guilt over the things that do not matter drain the attention those important things require. There is one commitment that matters more than any other, and you may be breaking this without noticing. The commitment to yourself. Every time you start a pursuit and abandon it when the intensity fades, you are not just abandoning the pursuit, you are sending a signal to yourself about what your word is worth. The signal is quiet. There is no consequence in the moment. No one confronts you. No invoice arrives. But the signal accumulates exactly the way volume accumulates. One broken commitment to yourself is negligible. 100 broken commitments to yourself over years becomes an identity. And that identity is, I am unreliable. This is the identity cost of avoiding volume. It doesn't matter that you didn't finish a project or that you abandoned a skill. What matters is you built a self whose word is negotiable. And the cost is invisible until it isn't. You wonder why you do not trust yourself to follow through. You wonder why new commitments feel hollow before you even begin. You wonder why you've stopped believing that this time will be different. The answer is not in the current commitment. It's in the volume of broken ones that preceded it. The body is conditioned as the mind is trained. When you repeatedly break commitments to yourself, you condition a self that expects to break them. The expectation becomes the default. The default becomes the identity. The reversal of this is not dramatic. It is not a single act of will that undoes years of accumulated evidence. It's the same principle applied in the opposite direction. You make one commitment, small, specific, modest enough to survive the death of enthusiasm, and you keep it, regardless of how you feel, because you said you would. Then you keep it again and again. Each instance is negligible. The accumulation is not. Over time, the signal changes. The evidence your own behavior provides begins to point in a new direction. You start to trust yourself because you've accumulated enough instances of kept commitments that the evidence leaves you no other choice. This is what following through produces. The quiet discipline of doing what you said you would do over and over until the accumulation becomes the proof. Self-competition in this light is not about beating yesterday's version of yourself in a single display of effort. It's about outlasting yesterday's version across the weeks and months where nothing visible changes. The person who stays after the intensity fades is competing with the version of themselves that would have stopped. And every time they stay, they win by one more day, one more session, one more instance of keeping the commitment. And that is enough to change everything. The prize is not the finished project or the mastered skill. The prize is the self that knows it can be trusted. That is the identity volume builds. Volume is the second signal. It is quieter than intensity, slower to accumulate, and easier to neglect. But without it, intensity is a series of sparks that never become a fire. In the next episode, we begin the third of these 4 deep dives. Density. This is tightening the space between efforts. The signal that turns work into rhythm and rhythm into inevitability. Until then, look at your commitments, the ones you made to yourself. Pick one for now. Define the maintenance floor, the smallest version you can honor on the worst week of the year and the worst day. Then honor it however you feel. No excuses or negotiation. That is the practice. To exercise consistency and become the person who uses these signals to train follow-through, join the Act Score Challenge. That's it for today. Catch you next time.